All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Tom's Hardware Show for July 2nd, All right. 2020. And I can hear myself. Awesome. Um, and anyway, if you hear a little buzzing, that's because I had to put on some kind of like air conditioning or something in this room. But for those of you who don't know, I'm Avon Pilch, editor-in-chief, and I'm joined today, as always, by senior editor Sharon Harding, and this week by senior editor for graphics cards, GPUs, Jared Walton. And we're going to be talking about a bunch of things today, including and especially the most anticipated game of the year, Cyberpunk 2077. Which Jared has written an article about exactly what you're going to need to run Cyberpunk 2077, even though the game's publisher hasn't totally talked about that yet. While our audience is kind of trickling in, I just want to talk about what are you guys working on this week? That's cool. What do you have to? What can you tell our audience that you're working on? Sharon?
Well, I can't tell our audience much because I'm actually working on a couple peripheral reviews for some things that'll be announced next week. So that's kind of all I can say. They are from brands that we have all heard of, if that gets anyone excited. Beyond that, something I guess I covered this week and will be watching going forward is Google actually bought a smart glass company called North, who makes focals, which I think we could say are the best looking smart glasses ever, which it's not a massive market, but they're actually wearable in the street and in public and outside of work. So it'll be interesting to see what Google does with that acquisition. And if we see another mainstream consumer pair of Google Glass again and what Google does with that. So I'll be watching that over the coming months.
What about you, Jared?
It's a quiet time for graphics cards. We're all waiting for Ampere and Big Navi to launch. Indications are that's going to be in September. Prior to that happening, there's not a whole lot new in the GPU world. Recently, I tested Ice Lake integrated graphics to try and get a feel for what we can expect from Intel's Tiger Lake graphics. Right now, I've been retesting a bunch of graphics cards on a Ryzen 9 3900X system, just to see what scaling actually looks like across more than one resolution for our test suite. So that's kind of interesting. I've gone from everything starting at the top, the RTX 2080 Ti, down to as low as a GTX 1660 Super. I've got a few more cards left to test still. Interesting thing is, the CPU, the 9900K, still comes out on top just by a small amount, even with as low as a 1660 Super. So that was kind of interesting. I'll have the full numbers later, but obviously if you're running at 1440p or 4K with maxed out settings, you're going to see less of a delta. But I want to say the 2080 Super, 2080 Ti, those type of cards, even at 4K, there was still a 5 to 10% benefit to going with an Intel 9900K over a 3900X, which was kind of surprising to me because I actually thought it would be a negligible delta, but it could be motherboard firmware, it could be other stuff, but there still is a definite gaming advantage to Intel CPUs.
Great. So I haven't had anything too super exciting this week. Working on reviewing a couple of laptops, namely the latest ThinkPads for our site. So far, so good there. Obviously, everyone is very excited about Cyberpunk 2077, even though it's not coming out until November at the earliest. The trailer from last week really got people hyped up. So Jared went out and he actually did some really informed speculation about what you will need to not only play Cyberpunk 2077 on your PC, but play it really well and get all the special effects that you want. So, Jared, tell us about that. What do you think folks are going to need at the minimum, and what do you think folks should be getting if they're planning a system for Cyberpunk 2077?
So, I mean, the minimum's pretty easy to get a reasonable idea because it will run on current generation consoles. So if you've got an Xbox One or a PlayStation 4, you'll be able to play Cyberpunk 2077 on that, which means that the minimum requirements for PC are going to be, typically the same as what you'd see with other modern games. I would say like a 1060 or an RX 580. That should be able to run it fine at 1080p. Probably not at maxed out settings. You might have to turn down the settings to medium or whatever. You can also look back at The Witcher 3 to kind of get an idea of where CD Projekt Red went there. At launch, that was a super demanding game. I mean, at 4K ultra settings with a single GTX 980, you were looking at something like 22, 25 frames per second. And even with GTX 980 Ti SLI, so 2 GPUs, you would still only get like 45 frames per second. And that was a GPU that launched months after The Witcher 3 came out. So we know CD Projekt Red is really capable of pushing hardware to the limit if you want to max out settings. How important is it to max out settings? Like, that's going to vary by individual taste. I don't think you need to run at 4K, certainly. If you've got a 1440p monitor, I still think that's the sweet spot because you can get high refresh rates with a still very good display. So like the IPS or the VA 1440p 144 hertz and above monitors are a great gaming solution. And I think if you've got anything decent, like anything RTX series or above, or even an RX series, like RX 5000 series from AMD, you should be able to run the game and get a good experience. If you want to enable ray tracing effects, though, that kind of kicks it up a notch. And looking at what they say it's supporting, it's basically the same sort of effects that you see in Control, which was, to date, that's the best implementation of ray tracing in a game. So you have transparent reflections, shadows, ambient occlusion, and diffuse lighting, all done via ray tracing calculations. And every one of those adds to the complexity. And so I would imagine there's a very realistic chance that ray tracing in Cyberpunk 2077 is going to cut your frame rates in about half. DLSS 2.0 is supported. That will recover probably 30 to 40% of the performance you lose from ray tracing. And so you get this kind of balancing act. I think any RTX card is going to be able to run the game fine. If you're looking at higher resolutions, maxed out settings quality, RTX 2080 Ti probably will do okay. I'm not sure if you're going to get 1440p at 60 frames per second with all the ray tracing enabled, though. I think to get that, the rumors are saying RTX 3080 is going to be about 30% faster than an RTX 2080 Ti right now, which actually seems pretty reasonable based on the specs. The 3090 or 3080 Ti or whatever the upper cards end up being called, those could easily be 50 to 70% faster than your current 2080 Ti, and in ray tracing, the gap might even be larger. So if you don't have a pressing need to buy a graphics card today, like, it would be wise to wait for Ampere and Big Navi to launch just to see where they land. I suspect it will be a pretty watershed moment for NVIDIA's RTX series. So having first-gen RTX hardware when second-gen becomes available is going to feel a little painful, I suspect. So basically, if you want ray tracing, you've got to have an RTX card, or you got to wait for Big Navi and Ampere. Anything else we want to talk about?
What? Well, I mean, I think the question is, first of all, let's talk a little bit about the game. I assume we've all seen the trailer. What do you guys think of the game? Like, Sharon, is this a game you would want to play?
I had to watch the trailer twice because I watched it once and it ended with that character that Keanu Reeves is voicing, and I just like didn't know what was going on, and it ended, and I saw Keanu Reeves, and I was like, "What's happening?" So I watched again, and I think that in itself kind of tells you a little something. Because how many times would I watch a game trailer twice? Not that many. I'm cautious about getting too excited, considering it's been delayed multiple times, but. Just in terms of what I've seen in the trailers and what Jared kind of described with the different ray tracing effects. It's definitely a game I would play, but I'm wondering how much I'll be able to notice those effects. I won't like it's hard for me with ray tracing when it first came out. I'll never forget we were in the office and one of our colleagues had the Battlefield 5 demo playing on two computers, one with ray tracing and one without it. And this was early when it was first released. And there was a group of us there and he said, which one is ray tracing? And there's four of us and we all pointed to the wrong screen. so I'm a little skeptical, not to say the games won't look amazing, but is it going to be very different? I'm not sure. I believe Jared is the expert, but it seems that they'll have four different forms of ray tracing in this game compared to the one that I've seen in other games. So I mean, there's potential. It looks like a beautiful game. I'm not completely sold on ray tracing myself yet, but definitely looks like fun. My mom is a big Keanu Reeves fan, so there's hope I could get her into gaming with this, but it does definitely seem fun. And I just like the excitement of people actually being excited for a new game to come out. I think we had that with, or at least, on my side of, who I speak to with the God of War and the Spider-Man games. So it's just always exciting to have like a new title come out that people are excited about, assuming it comes out.
Yeah, I think obviously that's something that people are looking forward to. And in a time where it just seems like there's not a lot of fun stuff to look forward to. There isn't hardware, but in the world.
Hardware is always exciting.
Yes. That this game could really make people really give people something to look forward to. I have played I have not spent a lot of time following this game, but when I watched the trailer, I was like, wow, that looks really good. But man, in this cyberpunk future, everybody needs to see a dermatologist because they all have really bad scar problems, like vitamin E, something. I don't know what they're going to need. But your ray tracing will allow you to see every detail of the dude's scars.
Well, I mean,
anyway,
you do have to. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I was going to say you do have to put ray tracing in perspective. Like they're saying, it will be shadows and reflections. So all of the detailed textures and such, you'll get that with existing hardware. It'll just be like the extra effects. I don't think ray tracing is going to be required. I'm hoping there will be some cool effects in the game that actually show, like Battlefield 5 is a really poor case for ray tracing because it only does reflections, which is on like puddles and in a few glass surfaces, and it's an action game. So, but yeah, I'm a Cyberpunk junkie, and by that I don't mean Cyberpunk 2020 or Cyberpunk 2077, but like one of the formative books of my youth was Neuromancer. For those of you who like the genre, I've read it probably multiple times. I've searched for good cyberpunk stories all my life, and sadly there's a dearth of them. Even today I'm like, are there any new good cyberpunk stories? Like with this game coming out, there should be. Netflix is doing some cartoon graphic novel type stuff, right? But that's not until 2022, and I'm like, well, that sucks. So if you've got a good cyberpunk book that you think I should read, like fire it off, because I'm super excited just to see like a good computerized take on the genre. I mean, I like the Deus Ex stuff too, so this is right up my alley.
Does it seem like it's doing it justice based on just like the trailers you've seen and the themes and vibes they're going for?
Yeah, I mean, like, you can go too dark where you kind of lose some people if you don't have some comedic relief and stuff. So I think they're going for a good balancing act. It'll be a bright kind of peppy future in the daytime, and then at night things might get a little more difficult and dark and demented and whatnot. But I mean, I've read some people where they're like, yeah, cyberpunk needs more punk. It shouldn't be so just like cybery. And I'm like, I don't care about the punk. I just want the cyber part. I'm a computer hardware nerd. Plug me into the Matrix.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. In that, they're not going to wear focal north glasses because those look too normal. Like
They can
it's got to
they can
be.
get the Google Glass.
And it is an alternative
Yeah.
feature, right? Like I believe the Cyberpunk setting is like the silicon microchip and the revolution we've lived through is not actually the backstory for Cyberpunk 2020, Cyberpunk 2077. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but like it's not totally different, but it is, it's not like a post Microsoft, Apple, Google world.
So when you die, you don't get a giant blue screen of death in front of yourself.
That'd be good.
It's a dad joke. Anyway, so let's talk about some of our reader questions about the specs because I think folks would like to know. So someone asked at the very beginning of our show, Jacob asks, let me see if I can make this appear here. He asks, I would certainly hope that my Core i5 6600K and 16 gigabytes of RAM and GTX 1080 can handle a 2K. I don't think he was serious. Could he even play with that?
Oh, for sure he'll play it. Like that's still more powerful than the current generation consoles. Like you're not going to max it out, and the CPU is probably his weak point, right? Because we've now had 8-core stuff floating around for 3 years, and we are moving beyond 4-core, 4-thread. So I don't think that will necessarily mean he can't play it at 30 to 60 frames per second. But if the level of detail we've seen in the cities and the trailers is typical of the game, I think all of the AI and stuff running those routines for the crowds moving around is going to hit the CPU pretty hard. So I think your 6-core and 8-core chips are probably going to have a real benefit for a change.
So another listener, watcher, viewer, Lord Ahab. I love his avatar here. Says, so if I buy a last gen 3950X now and an RTX 3080, it will run okay, or do I need to wait for Ryzen 4000s?
It better run okay, right? Like a 3950X is your top of the AMD stack unless you go Threadripper, and 3080 isn't out yet. So will the Ryzen 4000 be faster? Probably. Like the unified L3 cache that they're doing on Zen 3 is going to improve latency, which games are pretty impacted by latency. If you look at like the Ryzen 3 3300X reviews, you can see that even though that's a 4-core 8-thread processor, it still outperforms the 6-core 12-thread Ryzen parts in a lot of games because it has a faster unified L3 cache. So presumably the larger L3 cache and unified L3 cache of Zen 3 is going to help in games more than in other aspects. So, but yeah, I mean, you can wait or you can buy now. If you already have the Ryzen 3950X, like no worries. If you haven't bought one last year, I wouldn't buy one today necessarily.
So another viewer named Steve says, I have a Ryzen 2700X and RTX 2080. I'm hoping for max settings. We'll be getting Ryzen 9 4000 when they are out. Can Steve get Ryzen 2700X, RTX 2080? Do you think Steve will be able to get Mac to play at 4K?
Or not 4K. He says max settings. He doesn't say resolution, right? So I think
another post Steve says 1440p.
With DLSS 2.0, probably 60-ish frames per second. Like that would be my assumption, is that a 2080 with DLSS and ray tracing will probably do 1440p at close to 60 frames per second. And this is a game where I don't think you're going to need like 60 to 100 to even higher frame rates. I think anything between 40 to 60 is going to be okay. So if you're okay with that, I think you'll be able to play it and enjoy it. If you want faster than 60, you might have to tweak your settings or lower the resolution. We'll know the official word in a few weeks, right?
A viewer named Nigel Warlock says, hello all, I have a 3700X GTX 1080 Ti and 32 gigabyte of RAM at 3600 megahertz. I'm hoping 1080p 60 so I can stream it. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's like, what do you want to play at? I think since it's a GTX card, it's not going to be ray tracing, so that will probably eliminate a lot of the potential bottleneck, right? Because ray tracing, I think, could potentially cut performance in half. So it's like, well, take ray tracing out of the picture, and I think a GTX 1080 Ti is still going to be more than fast enough to run it at 60 frames per second.
So let's get to the other side of this equation, which Sharon is an expert on, which is what monitor should you get to run Cyberpunk, to make the most out of Cyberpunk 2077? What do you think, Sharon? What would you recommend for this game?
I'm in the 1440p camp with and Jared. That's just in general, I think, a nice balance between performance and price. And I think there are so many 4K screens out there and just not as much use for it. And a lot of times you won't notice the difference between 1440p and 4K, depending on your setup. So if you're sitting very close to it, you'll notice the difference more. Or if you have a very big screen, you might want more pixels to get better pixel density there. So yeah, I think 1440p is definitely a good place to go. But if you want to be extreme, I'm always a fan of going to 4K. I just think because the screens are so prominent, I'd love to see people just using the technology to its fullest. I know that takes a lot of money and some powerful parts, but there is a future-proofing aspect to it. And yeah, if you can manage to build a 4K machine or have a 4K machine, you can afford it, definitely go for it because it's the next wave. It's cool, but you probably don't need it unless you're going to be super close to it or have a mega big screen, which a lot of those mega big screens come in 4K. Anyway.
Do you go for ultra wide or do you go with your standard 16:9 aspect ratio?
Ooh, for Cyberpunk, I might go ultra wide so I could feel like I'm in that world. And I don't know. I'm telling you, I don't really understand the plot. Am I switching bodies with Keanu Reeves? Like, what is happening? Either way, I want Keanu Reeves like right up in my face.
He's going to be a what? He's like a ROM or something that you'll be able to see. He's dead, but his brain's encoded into a computer of sorts, and so he's like your helper or something to that effect.
So how come in the trailer they're looking at their hands like they don't understand who they are?
I'd have to look at it again to actually see. He might have been in a cyberpunk, not a cyberpunk, but a cyberspace, or their equivalent of that. So it's like looking at the digital hands as opposed to your real hands, I would think.
But yeah, since this is going to be such a beautiful and all these environmental effects, all the graphics in the environment, I would love to do ultra wide curve to just really immerse myself in that and see all those minute details that you get, assuming you have a ray tracing build and can take advantage of all of that.
So a reader asks, what 1440p monitor would you recommend?
Oh, I would say there's a lot of good options right now. In this space, I actually talked about this last week. We're seeing more of them, and we're seeing them in different flavors, as in like different panel types. So if you want high contrast, there's a lot of good options. Normally we say high contrast is best for image quality, so that would be VA. If you're doing something like we just talked about, like ultra wide, you're going to probably want something with IPS for those viewing angles. One of the monitors we recommend for 1440p right now comes from, sorry, I have a delivery guy here right now. Honestly, I think it's a review laptop, so I'm just going to let him in, to be honest.
You can't miss the review laptop. It won't be back.
I'll be happy that I got that laptop in though. Yeah, so 1440p. If you want a specific model name, there's the Aorus FI27Q. It's about $450. If you can get something in like the $400 range, that's kind of what a lot of the monitors we've been seeing now are about $400 and giving good accuracy and good performance. Another one we recommend is the Aorus CV27Q. That's a VA panel, so that's going to give you really good contrast. It's 165 hertz, and that's also around $400, maybe like $430. And also, I'd recommend you check out we have like a whole list, our best gaming monitors page, and you can check that out because we break it down for, different needs. So maybe you want something that's extra saturated, or you don't need 165 hertz, you can go lower. So, but yeah, those are some recommendations. I hope that helped.
And you also, like, one of the great things with the FreeSync monitors, because they're cheaper than G-Sync, is that now you've got G-Sync compatible that generally works. So like if you have AMD or NVIDIA graphics cards, you can usually make good use of the higher refresh rates and variable rate refresh rates on both GPU types. But if you buy a G-Sync monitor, you have to get an NVIDIA GPU in order to utilize it. So
it's funny about that, and NVIDIA has an official certification for that, but we've actually gotten a lot of non-certified monitors to run G-Sync compatibility, even though they're not certified to do so.
Yeah,
Granted, I guess they're not guaranteed to meet every qualification, but we've gotten it to work many times.
Yeah, I've tried to find out what NVIDIA did for their testing, because I talked to them a little bit and they said, oh yeah, we did like 300 different tests to verify that the variable refresh rate doesn't break or have artifacts in all of these cases. And I almost feel like they overdid it just to make a bunch of the monitors fail because they didn't want FreeSync to be as good as G-Sync, right? But I've played with it a little bit on several monitors, only one of which is actually officially G-Sync compatible, and it worked fine for me. So, your mileage may vary, but I think if you've got a 144 hertz or higher refresh rate, FreeSync monitor, that you'll be fine.
So we have a reader question, but I wanted to get to something else after that. So we'll get through this one real quick. I think I know the answer to this, but Jared, reader wants to know, what should they upgrade first? Their CPU, which is 2700, which is a Ryzen 7 2700X, or their GTX 1070 graphics card? I'm going to guess you're going to say graphics card.
Yeah, almost always it's going to be the GPU, unless you're like sitting on a 4-core processor. I think your GPU is your best bet. Once you're at 6-core or above, so Ryzen 5 or above, or like 8th gen Intel i6 or above, i5 or above, you should be fine on the CPU side. You might get 5 to 10% more performance, but even like the fastest CPU dropping down to like a Ryzen 5 3600 at 1080p Ultra with a 2080 Ti, it's still only like a 10 to 15% delta in performance. So, your GPU is much more of a factor than your CPU.
I think that's true across every game and every gaming scenario. Speaking of gaming scenarios, Sharon has one that she has a new peripheral that she was checking out that really can improve your game experience in ways that go beyond your GPU and your monitor. So I don't know.
I know what it is.
I'm never against RGB. So tell us what this is.
Okay. Ignore Jared's laughs. This is a very helpful product for your build.
It will make you go faster for sure.
So Corsair announced this week. Here, get that in view. These are basically reactive RGB sticks. It's literally the Corsair LT100 smart lighting towers. And so what you get, sorry, live. So you get 2 to start. That's the starter kit. And the thing I just knocked off ever so gracefully is a headset hook. So it can also hold your headset if you desire. But basically you get a starter kit. So you get 2 lights. And then if you want to add more, you can add up to 2 more. So I have a starter kit plus an expansion kit. And you plug these into your computer and also an outlet. And also they're all connected via an RGB cable that you can't see. So there are 3 cables involved total. And yeah, so you plug it into your computer and it works with Corsair's IQ software, meaning that if you have other Corsair peripherals or components that have RGB, it'll work with those as well. There are a bunch of preset settings in the software. So You can play around with those, and it's also customizable. There are 46 LEDs in each one, so you could play around with that. Disappointingly, there are other products like this, and including there's Philips Hue has one, and there's a Nanoleaf, and those can actually react to what's going on in your game. Corsair doesn't have that functionality yet. They told me they plan on adding that, so that is something I would like to see. But there is one thing I could show you right now besides all these different colors. Just give me a second, because it does. So one of the things it could do right now is it can react to, the colors can mimic what's on your screen, and you could pick what part of the screen it'll mimic. But obviously, if you're playing a game like Cyberpunk or really any game, there's going to be a lot of colors going on there at once. So the effect might not be that dramatic, but it also has the ability to react to audio coming out of your computer. So if you can hear I'll shut up. You could see it's playing, going higher as with the tune.
Nice. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So this is all just a visual play, a shameless RGB indulgence. But if you've ever said the phrase, I need more RGB, Abram, then this is a product worth considering for sure.
Now, can you get into a lightsaber duel with them with another person, or will the wires get yanked out?
It won't light up anymore, but you can definitely bang someone on the head with this if you wanted. Is that what you want? That's one of my critiques of it. You can't mount these. It has to be in its base to work. You can see the base is still lit up. So I wanted to like put it all around my setup and have RGB raining down upon me, but that's not really an option here.
You should mount them in the ceiling as like stalactites hanging down. That'd be kind of cool.
I wrote in my article, actually, when I was in high school, I had black lights like mounted all over my room, and I thought that's what I could do here, bring it back to my high school days, but they pretty much have to be on a flat surface. But yeah.
I'm waiting for the shameless like Cyberpunk RGB lighting tie-ins to hit the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd have to figure out I think it's cool if you have lighting that actually goes along with something that happens in the game. And we can never have enough RGB.
Here's one I also
my son and I were debating.
Sorry, but just like one feature that would probably be interesting is that it could also read to you your CPU temperature. So right now mine is running at 140 degrees. Well, it's in Fahrenheit, but I could change it to Celsius if I wanted. And I can tell based on the color code, if it was cooler, it'd be yellow or green. So that's like mildly fun. And you could do it by core too.
That's neat. But you can only do 4 of them. So if you have more than 4 cores, you can't see.
They'll all show you for one core at a time, or you
can't individually set the lights.
No, you can't.
Oh, that kind of sucks.
You can tell your graphics card too. Mine's at 68. Oh no, it's at 104 right now.
Yeah, I see. Well, it's. I think they definitely need to do some work on the software to make it a little bit more useful. But yeah, you can never have it. You can never have enough RGB. So
Never.
Is that syncing to our audio right now? What's that doing?
This is the rain effect. Because when it rains, it's raining pink and blue and yellow and whatnot.
Yes. Well, hey. I mean, I think, the thing that people are going to start having in when Cyberpunk becomes real is that they're just going to have that built into their body, right? You're just going to have an RGB arm.
Maybe that's where the bad skin comes from.
Light up.
RGB.
Yeah, like yeah, exactly. You just see, I mean, we were reading today about some RGB clothing, right? So the chance for you to have more RGB is always there.
Everyone wants
the question
RGB
I have is,
tattoo.
Does anybody ever want just? Yes, I just want my entire skin to just be art. just flicker all the time. But I mean, does anybody ever actually want just one color? Because usually when I see people with RGB things, it's like, yeah, let's just make it light up all the colors. I mean,
if you're going for a certain look, like if you get like a cute pink case and some pink keycaps for your keyboard, you know, like a whole theme, I could see that. But how could you resist rainbow wave?
Yeah. Exactly. Yes.
How could you?
My son and I were debating this week, like which RGB light project we want to do with our Raspberry Pis next. Do we want to get just like a little hat attachment that lights up in different RGB colors, or are we going to get an entire LED matrix? We have this idea to put an LED matrix on the wall behind me, and just like have it get, if we can make one that's long enough to go across that entire space, and then have it show different pieces of information while I'm on this show. But those matrices are a little expensive, so we'll have to see. Well, we're getting toward the end of our time here. Does anybody in the audience have any other questions about anything? Cyberpunk 2077 or RGB lighting? So yeah, I think that is it. But I thank you everybody who watched in real time, and to everyone who watches or listens after. Thanks so much. We will see you again next Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern on the Tom's Hardware Show. For Tom's Hardware, I'm Avram.
I'm Sharon.
And Jared.
We'll see you next time.